My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 59 years old, a widow, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Oregon. I've worked as an office manager at a law firm for nearly 2 decades, raised 2 children, Emily, my daughter who just turned 32, and Luke, my 29-year-old son, and spent most of my adult life making sure they never had to struggle the way I did. Last Tuesday, I received an email that changed everything. It was from Emily. No subject line, just her name sitting in my inbox. I smiled before opening it, thinking maybe it was a quick update or a sweet note before her big day. We had just spoken about her wedding plans a few weeks ago. I had already contributed $30,000 to help her book the venue, secure a photographer, and reserve the florist she loved since college. But when I opened the email, the smile vanished. Mom, the email started, "No, dear Mom, just Mom," like a label. Emily explained that she, along with her fiancé Andrew and his family, had finalized the guest list for the ceremony in Napa Valley. And after much thought, they decided it was best for me to watch the wedding via livestream, not in person. She added that Andrew's mother was particular about the guest count and wanted to keep things intimate. At the end, she included a line that felt like salt in an open wound. "If you want to be a part of it, you can watch through the Google Meet link we've created. Should be just like being there, LOL. LOL. I stared at that screen for a long time. My coffee grew cold. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't cry. Something inside me quietly shifted, like the ground had cracked open but I was still standing. I replied with just 4 words, "Sure. Enjoy your big day." No emotion, no argument, just a quiet withdrawal. And I knew, deep down, that those 4 words would echo louder than any scream. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want tears. I wanted clarity. I wanted the silence to speak for itself. I closed the laptop, finished my now cold coffee, and got ready for work like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. That was the day I stopped pretending that my sacrifices meant anything to my daughter. That was the day everything began to change. The drive to the office that morning was quiet. Oregon's early spring air still held a chill, but I barely noticed. My mind kept circling the same question: how did we get here? I've spent 18 years working at Caldwell Walker Law. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. And stability was what I needed after my husband died suddenly when the kids were still teenagers. I remember standing in front of our old washing machine, bills spread across the counter, trying to figure out how to pay for both groceries and Emily's upcoming college deposit. Back then, I didn't think twice about giving up my weekends. I took extra shifts, canceled vacations, skipped birthdays. I told myself there'll be time for me later. There never was. Every penny I saved went to Emily and Luke. When Emily changed majors twice and needed more credits, I paid. When she moved across the country for a short-lived job in New York, I covered her deposit and plane ticket. When she cried through her second breakup at 27, I flew out, held her hand, and made her tea in a kitchen that didn't feel like home. When Luke wanted to buy a house with his fiancée, I co-signed the mortgage and wrote the first $10,000 check without hesitation. I never kept score. That's what mothers do, right? But that email made me feel like a transaction, like I had been useful and now I wasn't, like I had a shelf life and it had expired. Back at the office, my boss Robert stopped by my desk. He's one of those rare men who remembers birthdays and how you take your coffee. He noticed something was off right away. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, setting a lat from the cafe downstairs on my desk. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say my daughter just disinvited me from her wedding. But instead, I smiled and said I hadn't slept well. He didn't push. That small act of kindness, the coffee, the silence nearly undid me. After all the noise in my head that morning, it reminded me that I still existed, that I still mattered, even if only quietly. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. Emily again. Her name lit up my screen like a spotlight I didn't want. Voicemails, texts. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk. This isn't funny." I didn't listen to any of them, not yet. I just sat there, sipping my latte, and thought, maybe it's time to stop being the one who always answers. Maybe it's time to stop playing a role in someone else's story when they won't let you on the stage. That afternoon, I made a decision that would shift the ground beneath all of us. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to act. After work, I didn't go straight home. I drove to First Federal Bank, a few blocks down from the office. Carlos, the branch manager, had helped me with everything from setting up college funds to adjusting retirement contributions. He always greeted me by name. "Mrs. Collins," he smiled, standing to shake my hand. "What can I do for you today?" I sat down across from him and placed my purse on the floor. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "I need to cancel a wire transfer," I said. He blinked. "The one to the Napa venue?" "Yes, that one." Carlos hesitated. "There may be a cancellation fee depending on timing, but may I ask why?" "The circumstances have changed," I replied, without elaborating. He looked something up on his screen. "You're in luck. It hasn't processed yet. Just in time." He paused, then looked up at me. "Are you sure, Mrs. Collins? $50,000 is a significant amount." I nodded. "I'm sure." $50,000. That was the amount I had planned to send next, on top of the $30,000 already gone. $80,000 total, for a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend. I signed the necessary forms and left the bank without a second thought. By the time I got home, there were 9 missed calls from Emily, 2 from Luke. One voicemail simply said, "Mom, please, don't do this." I turned off my phone. In the kitchen, I reached for the bottle of red wine I'd been saving for Thanksgiving. I hadn't opened it back then. Emily was supposed to visit, but she canceled last minute. "Work," she said. I poured a glass, took it out to the porch, and sat in the fading sunlight. Birds chirped in the trees. A neighbor's dog barked. Everything felt still. And then the memories started coming in waves. All the birthdays I planned alone. All the holiday dinners where I pretended I wasn't waiting for a call that never came. All the small sacrifices that nobody noticed. The new shoes I didn't buy. The car I drove for 14 years. The vacations I postponed. I thought about Andrew's mother, the woman who barely knew Emily, yet her opinion carried more weight than mine. The woman whose idea of family meant excluding the one person who had carried Emily through every hard season of her life. I thought about the way Emily signed off her email with LOL. As if watching your own daughter's wedding through a screen was a joke. And finally I thought about myself, not as a mother, not as a widow, but as a woman. What did I want? Peace, dignity. A life that didn't revolve around being useful to people who only showed up when they needed something. That night, around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was Luke, still in his office clothes, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked uncomfortable, holding his phone in one hand like a shield. "Mom," he said, stepping inside before I could speak. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Emily's freaking out." I shut the door calmly. "Hello to you too." He sighed, already pacing. "She says you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult." I laughed. Difficult? For not attending a wedding I was uninvited from? He shifted uncomfortably. "Andrew's parents are footing most of the bill, Mom. You know how traditional they are." I raised an eyebrow. Traditional? I already paid $30,000. I was about to give $50,000 more. That's not tradition, that's a buyout. He froze. "Wait, you were sending another 50. "Was," I said, sipping my wine. "But not anymore." Luke's face went pale. "Mom, they're counting on that. The venue, the food, the—" "Not my problem anymore," I said evenly. His voice rose. "Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter." "And I'm her mother," I said quietly. "A mother who was told to stay home and watch from a screen." He ran his hands through his hair, visibly agitated. "You always make everything about yourself." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me finally gave way. "Get out of my house." "What?" "You heard me, Luke. Get out." "Mom." "No," I said, firm but soft. "I've given everything I had, and I'm done being the villain in a story I wrote with love." Luke stood there for a second longer, then turned and walked out. The door clicked behind him quietly, but it felt louder than any slam. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart pounding, and realized something startling. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to 43 missed calls and a string of frantic messages from Emily. They started with passive-aggressive guilt. "Mom, we need to talk." "Why are you doing this?" "This is childish." Then the tone shifted. "The venue just called. The payment didn't go through. We're going to lose everything if we don't pay by tomorrow. Andrew's parents are furious. They said this proves they were right about you." At 3:24 a.m., she sent. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me." I smiled into my coffee. Of course she didn't understand. Emily had grown up with my sacrifices woven so tightly into her life that she never stopped to question where the comfort came from, the security, the stability. She just assumed it would always be there. That I would always be there. But not this time. Later that morning, while I was reviewing contracts at my desk, an email popped up in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Please don't ruin my wedding. I opened it without expectation. "Mom," she wrote, "I know you're upset about the livestream situation, but this is extreme. We've lost the venue deposit, and if we don't pay the remaining balance by end of day Paris time, the caterer walks. Andrew's parents are beyond upset. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds first." There it was. They were willing to talk about letting me attend, now that the money was gone. Not an apology, not a reflection. A negotiation. As if my presence at my own daughter's wedding could be bartered, bought, or sold depending on how generous I was feeling. I didn't respond. I closed the email and turned back to my work. Around noon, Robert stopped by my desk. "Lunch," he offered. "That new Italian place just opened." I almost declined, as I usually did. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the clarity of the past 24 hours. Maybe I just needed to sit somewhere that didn't ask anything from me. So I nodded. I'd like that. Over pasta, he told me about his grandkids and how exhausting but beautiful it was to chase after them. His eyes were soft. Real. He paused and said gently, "Forgive me, Margaret, but you seem lighter today." I surprised myself. I told him everything. About Emily, the email, the wedding, the money, and what I did. When I finished, he didn't judge. He didn't try to fix anything. He just said, "Sometimes the hardest part of love is setting boundaries, especially with the people we've given the most to." He reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. "I think you did the right thing." For the first time in a long time, I believed that too. When I returned to my desk, there were more calls, more texts. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, my silence spoke volumes. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the sky was already dimming. The porch light clicked on automatically. Everything looked still peaceful, even. But there was someone sitting on my front steps. As I got closer, I recognized her. Sophia. She stood up quickly, brushing invisible lint from her coat. Sophia had been Emily's best friend since 5th grade. She spent countless weekends at our house, baking cookies, watching movies, giggling in sleeping bags until dawn. I hadn't seen her in years. "Mrs. Collins," she said softly, "I'm sorry to drop by like this." "It's fine," I replied, unlocking the door. "Would you like some tea?" She followed me into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the familiar walls like they held old echoes. I filled the kettle and waited. "Emily sent you?" I finally asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "She's a mess. They lost the venue. The florist dropped out. Andrew's parents are threatening to cancel the wedding." I said nothing, placing 2 mugs on the counter. "She's panicking," Sophia continued. "She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it." "Is that why you're here?" I asked. "To fix it?" She shook her head. "No, I'm here to ask, is there anything she can say or do to change your mind?" I paused. Was there? Would an apology change the way it felt to be excluded? To be used like a bank account? To be told you're not welcome unless your money is? I looked at Sophia, still young, still hopeful. "No," I said quietly. "There isn't." Her shoulders sagged. "Not even if she apologizes?" I handed her a mug of tea. Words are easy, Sophia, especially when people are desperate. But the people who love you, they don't wait until you cut them off to see you. Sophia looked down into her tea, nodding slowly. I get it, she said, even if she doesn't. I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. You don't need to be, I replied. We stood in silence for a moment, two women from different generations connected by one hard truth. Sometimes love has limits. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to walk away. Sophia didn't stay long. She didn't try to argue. She just thanked me, hugged me gently, and walked back into the night. And I finally closed the door on a version of myself I had long outgrown. The wedding never happened, not as they planned, anyway. They scrambled to find another venue, but everything was either booked or far too expensive without the money I had once promised. According to Luke, they ended up doing a small backyard ceremony weeks later, just a few relatives and Andrew's parents. I wasn't invited. And this time, I didn't need to be. In the weeks that followed, Emily sent one more email, a long one, emotional, half apology, half justification. I read it once, then archived it. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. There's a strange peace that comes with letting go, not in rage, but in clarity. For the first time in decades, I woke up not wondering who needed something from me, not bracing for another guilt trip disguised as love. I made a new rule for myself: if my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. I go to work. I read novels. I joined a pottery class. I have dinner with friends who see me, not what I can give them. And I've learned something I wish I'd known sooner. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. If this story resonated with you, share it, comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself.
The lawyer's voice cut through the stillness of the room, every word sinking into me like a weight. The family residence and all primary assets go to Caroline Mercer. Caroline reached for her husband Grant's hand. They smiled, their satisfaction bold and unashamed, as though this was the victory they had waited for. I kept my face steady, the way I had through 42 years of marriage. Surely Ray had left something for me. Surely there was more. The lawyer cleared his throat, his tone clipped and final. And to my wife, Martha Hale, I leave the property in Colorado near the national park. That was it. Caroline leaned back in her chair, eyes wide with delight. That's all. The silence became a roar in my ears. I felt every gaze turned toward me, waiting for a reaction. But I gave them nothing, because what I felt in that moment could not be spoken aloud. Caroline was quick to fill the silence with her own brand of generosity. Of course, Mother can stay with us. At least until she gets settled, she said smoothly, patting Grant's arm as if the two of them were saints offering me charity. The room nodded along, relieved to see the tension softened by her words, but I could feel the edges of the trap. 2 weeks later, I understood exactly what her kindness meant. The home that had once been mine was now a stage where I played no role. My bedroom reduced to the guest room. My seat at the head of the table gone, replaced by Caroline's carefully arranged centerpieces and Grant's booming voice over dinner. I cooked the meals, I cleaned the dishes, and when their friends arrived, I stayed out of sight. I was no longer the heart of the household, but the shadow that moved silently through its corners. One evening, as the last guest's laughter faded into the night, Grant cornered me in the kitchen. He swirled bourbon in one of Ray's old crystal tumblers. "This isn't working, Martha," he said. I kept my hands busy, scraping food from plates, pretending his words meant nothing. "You were carried your whole life," he continued, leaning on the counter. "Ray did it. Caroline does it now. But we need our space. Independence will be good for you." The word independence landed like a stone. What he really meant was exile, and I knew it. The next morning I opened my bedroom door and stopped short. My suitcases were sitting in the hallway, already zipped and waiting like obedient dogs. Caroline appeared behind me, her smile carefully composed. She kissed my cheek as though nothing were unusual. "Mother, we think it's time. You should see what Dad left you. It's your place now." Grant followed with a sealed envelope in his hand. He pressed it into mine with smug finality. "Directions to the cabin, keys inside. Don't come back until you've figured out how to stand on your own 2 feet. We're not running a charity here." Caroline added softly, as if to soften the blow, "It's for your own good, Mom? You'll thank us one day?" Her hug was stiff, rehearsed, already finished before it began. At 68 years old, I walked down the steps carrying the remnants of my life. I loaded the bags into the modest sedan Ray had bought me 3 years earlier, the car that now felt like my only lifeline. The house I had built, the family I had raised, all of it stood behind me like a locked door. And for the first time in decades, I had nowhere to return to. The drive stretched across the day, each mile heavy with questions I couldn't answer. I left Helena Ridge behind, the only town I had ever called home, and followed the directions on the folded paper Grant had handed me. For hours the highway carried me through endless plains and winding foothills, until pavement gave way to gravel, and gravel thinned into a rutted dirt path. My phone signal vanished, as if the world itself had decided to abandon me too. The last 30 minutes were nothing but switchbacks carved into the side of a mountain, each turn steeper, lonelier than the one before. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road. Finally the cabin appeared, slouched at the edge of the trees. A sagging porch leaned toward the ground. Shingles were missing from the roof, windows were cracked and patched with boards. It looked like the kind of place you passed quickly, not one you entered. I parked in front of it, my heart heavy. "Ray, why here?" I whispered into the stillness. The house stood silent, its face weary and unforgiving, and I wondered if this was all my marriage of 4 decades had left me, an abandoned shell at the edge of the wilderness. I forced the rusted key into the lock. The door groaned on its hinges as if it hadn't opened in years. I braced myself for cobwebs and dust, but what greeted me was nothing like I expected. The cabin's interior glowed with warmth. Hardwood floors gleamed beneath soft rugs. A leather sofa faced a stone fireplace already set with logs. The kitchen sparkled with stainless steel appliances that looked as though they had just been polished. I froze in the doorway, my suitcase slipping from my hand. The table near the window was set for one. A plate with crumbs of bread, a mug half full of coffee, and a notebook left open, as if someone had just stepped out for a moment. The handwriting inside the notebook made my breath catch. Precise, slanted script I knew better than my own. Ray's. I turned to the date at the top of the page. It was 3 days ago. My knees weakened, and I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. Ray had been gone, buried, mourned for weeks. Yet here was his hand, alive on paper, alive in the smallest details of the room. The entry was brief but chilling. "Martha will be arriving soon. Everything must be in place. God, I hope she understands." The walls seemed to lean closer around me, holding secrets I wasn't ready for. And for the first time since Ray's funeral, I was more afraid of the truth than of the lies I had been living with. The silence pressed in on me, heavy and unnatural. I wandered deeper into the cabin, each room a contradiction to the decayed exterior. A study sat with papers spread across a desk, as if someone had stepped out mid-thought. A bedroom held rumpled sheets, the imprint of a body not long gone. In the corner, a bookshelf stood slightly ajar. I reached for it hesitantly. It swung outward with surprising ease, revealing a narrow passage lit by a faint strip of bulbs along the floor. My breath caught. The small chamber beyond looked like something from a spy thriller. The walls were covered with photographs, maps, and newspaper clippings connected by pins and colored string. Some faces I recognized instantly: politicians, business leaders, and, at the center, Grant Mercer. Notes in Ray's handwriting covered the margins, account numbers, dates, cryptic arrows pointing from one name to the next. Offshore accounts, shell companies, payments tucked neatly into the shadows of legitimate deals. In the middle of the desk sat a sealed envelope, my name written across it in Ray's familiar hand. I stared at it, paralyzed. My husband's ghost had already spoken through the furniture, through the pages of his notebook. Now he was speaking directly to me. The question wasn't whether I would open it. It was whether I was ready for what waited inside. With trembling hands, I tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter written in Ray's careful script. "My dearest Martha, if you're reading this, then you've found the truth. I'm sorry for the pain and confusion this has caused you. But what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. I'm not dead, at least not in the way you believe." I read the words twice, my eyes refusing to accept what they saw. Ray explained everything: how 5 years ago, while auditing contracts for Mercer Development, he discovered money being laundered through government projects. millions skimmed away, hidden behind shell companies. At the center was Grant, with powerful allies covering his tracks. Ray wrote how he began gathering evidence quietly but soon noticed he was being followed. Phones tapped. Our home bugged. I realized I had to disappear before they erased me. The staged heart attack, the funeral, it was the only way to survive. My pulse thundered as the letter offered me a choice. This house contains everything needed to expose them. You can take the files to Agent Ethan Ward in Loveland, or you can use the cash and new identity in the safe and vanish. Whatever you do, don't trust Caroline. She chose money over morality long ago. The last line pierced me deeper than any other. I've always known you were stronger than anyone believed, even you. I sat frozen in the hidden room, Ray's letter clutched in my hands, when I heard tires crunching on gravel outside. The sound of car doors followed, more than one. Through the narrow slit of the window I saw them, 2 black SUVs parked in front of the cabin. Men stepped out, not tourists, not hikers trained, deliberate, moving with the silence of hunters. My chest tightened. They weren't here by mistake. They were here for me. I remembered Ray's note. This house contains everything you need. My fingers brushed along the desk until I found a small panel beneath. With a push, the floor clicked open to reveal a narrow tunnel leading downward. Voices drifted through the walls, sharp commands, boots on the porch. The front door splintered open. I grabbed the go bag already waiting inside the passage. Whoever had prepared this had known the day would come. As I slipped into the tunnel, the dim bulbs lit automatically, guiding me forward. The air smelled of earth and metal. Above me, heavy footsteps searched for a widow, but beneath their boots I was already gone. The tunnel emptied into the woods half a mile from the cabin. I stumbled into the night, clutching the bag against my chest. My breath came in sharp bursts, each one echoing in the silence of the trees. Headlights appeared on the dirt road ahead, and panic shot through me. I froze, ready to dive back into the brush. But the vehicle that slowed to a stop wasn't a black SUV. It was an old pickup, dented along the fender, paint sun-faded. The driver leaned out, a weathered woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a steady voice. "You lost Ma, ma'am." Her name was Nell Whitaker, a ranch owner who had lived in those mountains all her life. Something in her tone, firm but kind, made me step closer. Before I could answer, another engine roared in the distance. Black vehicles rounded the bend. One of them slowed, spotlight sweeping across the trees. Nell's eyes narrowed. "Get in, now." Bullets snapped against the tailgate as she slammed the truck into gear. Gravel sprayed behind us, the mountains swallowing us whole as we disappeared into the night. Nell's truck rattled along back roads only she seemed to know. When we finally stopped, it was at a rundown motel outside a town so small it barely had a name. She parked under a broken sign that flickered once before dying completely. Inside the office, the air smelled of old coffee and dust. Nell locked the door behind us. "Whoever's after you isn't playing games," she said. "You need someone who can fight back." I thought of the letter of Ray's instructions. My hands shook as I pulled out the phone from the go bag. One number was written on the inside flap of the envelope, Ethan Ward. When he answered, his voice was calm, clipped. "This is Ward." I hesitated. "Ray Hale sent me." Silence. Then a shift in tone, sharper alert. "Where are you?" We spoke in fragments. He confirmed details only Ray could have known, phrases from an old camping trip, the name of a dog we once had. My fear steadied into focus. Ward explained the scope. Grant wasn't alone. There was an entire network of officials and businessmen laundering money through public projects. Timing was critical. He asked if I wanted protection. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I want justice." Dawn crept over the mountains like a slow breath. I stood at the motel window, watching the horizon pale, when Ward's convoy of unmarked SUVs rolled quietly into town. Agents moved with precision, radios crackling softly, their faces unreadable. "This is it," Ward said, sliding a vest over his shirt. "Once it begins, it moves fast." From the safety of a distance, Nell and I watched as the sweep unfolded. At the Mercer home, Grant was pulled from the porch in his robe, fury spilling from him as his hands were cuffed behind his back. Caroline bolted through the garden, hair wild, her bare feet slapping against the stone path. For one tense moment, I thought she might reach the street, but a car blocked her path, doors flung open, agents surrounding her. She lifted something in her hand and my breath stopped until I saw it was only a phone, not a gun. She dropped it when the agents shouted. No one cheered, no one clapped. The work was methodical, silent. Justice doesn't roar. It arrives in plain cars at sunrise and leaves with nothing more than signatures and silence. Months later, the courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and nerves. Reporters filled the benches, their pens ready to catch every word. But for me, the trial wasn't about headlines. It was about truth. When my name was called, I walked slowly to the stand. My palms were damp, yet my voice held steady as I swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor guided me through the story. I described the cabin, the hidden room, the letter in Ray's hand. I spoke of the night the SUVs came, of Nell's truck riddled with bullet holes, of the fear that still woke me in the dark. Photos were shown, maps, bank records. My testimony became one more thread in a web already wide with evidence. Then came the cross-examination. Miss Hale, the defense attorney said smoothly, "Isn't it true you were resentful of your daughter's inheritance?" "No," I replied. "Isn't it possible grief distorted your memory?" I held his gaze. I remember the sound of gunfire when my daughter raised a weapon at me. Grief doesn't create bullet holes. The room stilled. Even the attorney hesitated before turning back to his notes. For one brief moment, I looked at Caroline. She avoided my eyes, staring hard at the table in front of her. I wanted to remember her as the child who once held my hand in the grocery store, tugging me toward candy. But the truth sat between us now, undeniable. And truth, once spoken aloud, cannot be taken back. The jury returned after 2 long days. I sat rigid in the front row, Nell's hand folded gently over mine. The foreman's voice was even, stripped of emotion, as he read the verdicts one by one. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Grant Mercer bowed his head as if the weight finally broke his spine. Caroline stood tall at first, her chin lifted in defiance, but as the counts piled up, her shoulders sagged. When the judge pronounced her sentence 27 years in federal prison, the air seemed to collapse around us. Reporters scribbled. Cameras clicked, but inside me there was no triumph. There was only silence. Justice, I realized, doesn't come with applause. It doesn't heal the wound or return what was stolen. It signs its name on a piece of paper and waits for the world to carry on. As the bailiff led my daughter away, she never once looked back at me. Perhaps that was her last act of defiance. Or perhaps it was her only way to survive the shame. Months later, I returned to the cabin in Colorado, the house that had lied to me, hidden from me, and nearly destroyed me. But now it was different. Repairs had been finished, the roof no longer sagged, the porch stood straight and welcoming. Inside, light spilled across polished floors. The shadows that once carried fear now felt like corners for rest. I set up a studio in the spare room, paints and brushes spread across a wide table. For years I had silenced that part of myself, too busy being wife, mother, caretaker. Now, with the quiet of the mountains around me, I began again. The kitchen became exactly as I once dreamed it might be: bright counters, open shelves, a place that was mine in both design and spirit. I chose to stay, not because I needed to hide, but because I finally understood that survival is more than escaping danger. It is choosing how to live when the danger has passed. Looking back, I see more than betrayal and loss. I see lessons carved into every mile, every bruise, every silence. If something feels wrong, trust the instinct to pay attention. Write things down. Keep a record. The smallest note can one day become the strongest proof. Independence is not tied to age. At 68, I learned to stand alone, to fight for truth with no one but strangers at my side. You can learn it too, no matter when you start. And remember, this truth isn't vengeance. Truth is oxygen. It clears the air so you can finally breathe. If this story has touched you, share your thoughts below. Like, share, and subscribe. Your voice is what keeps this space alive. My name is Amanda Carter, and on the night of my 12th wedding anniversary, my husband decided I needed a lesson. We had just finished a quiet dinner at a downtown steakhouse when Andrew drove me out to an empty rest stop 37 miles from our home. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, thunder rolling in the distance. He left the engine running as if this was just another routine errand. Then he turned to me and said, "Get out. Walking home might teach you some respect." I sat in silence, watching the satisfaction on his face. For years he had been the one in control, dictating how money was spent, which friends I could see, and even how I dressed for his company dinners. Tonight was supposed to be about celebration, but instead he made it about power. As I stepped onto the cracked asphalt, I pressed record on my phone. He thought he was teaching me about obedience. He had no idea I had been waiting for this moment, preparing for months, documenting every cruel word and every lie. The storm was coming, and it was no longer just the weather. From the outside, Andrew Carter looked like the perfect husband. He was polished, confident, and successful, the kind of man neighbors admired and colleagues envied. He ran a hedge fund that appeared to thrive, and at social events he introduced me as his better half, smiling as though we were the picture of stability. But once the doors closed, the mask slipped. At home, Andrew believed control was love, and obedience was respect. It started small, almost invisible. He would question my purchases, asking why I chose organic produce when regular vegetables were half the price. He called my volunteer work a waste of time, insisting I should focus on keeping the house ready for his clients' visits. When I pushed back, he mocked my background in finance, reminding me that he earned the real money. He managed it, he said. I only spent it. The imbalance grew slowly, like water eroding stone. Andrew encouraged me to leave my career, claiming travel and late nights would strain our marriage. He asked me to let him handle the accounts to avoid confusion. Soon I was signing forms without reading them, convinced it was just routine. At dinner parties, he silenced me with a sharp look if I contradicted his opinions. I became smaller, quieter, until I almost believed his version of me. Yet even in those moments, a part of me knew something was wrong. The way he dismissed my concerns, the way he made me feel foolish for asking simple questions. It was not partnership, it was control. And that control was the foundation of his power. Andrew thought he had trained me to accept my place. What he never realized was that I was paying attention, memorizing every crack in his mask, waiting for the day I would pull it away completely. The first crack in Andrew's carefully polished world appeared on an ordinary Tuesday. I logged into our joint account to pay a bill and noticed $10,000 missing. When I asked him about it, he waved me off, saying it was a business expense I wouldn't understand. His tone was sharp, as though my curiosity was an insult. That night, I told myself not to overthink it. But once you start noticing inconsistencies, you can't unsee them. 2 days later, while making the bed, I found a pearl earring under the pillow. It wasn't mine. I remembered the look on his face when I held it up, the flicker of panic quickly hidden behind irritation. He claimed it belonged to a client's wife who had visited our home during a dinner. But the lie was too smooth, too rehearsed. My instincts told me otherwise. I began keeping a notebook tucked inside an old recipe book. Every odd withdrawal, every excuse, every moment that didn't add up, I wrote it down. At first the pages were sparse, but soon they filled with dates, amounts, and snippets of conversation. I also started recording arguments on my phone, carefully disguising it in my pocket. To anyone else, it might have looked like paranoia, but I knew better. Control leaves traces. Lies leave patterns. The pearl earring and the missing money were not accidents, they were warnings. And I was determined not to ignore them. Quietly, I began preparing for the storm I knew was coming. I knew I couldn't fight Andrew alone. His world was built on intimidation, on convincing me that no one would believe my side of the story. That was when I reached out to the only people I trusted completely. My brother Marcus Carter was the first. A former military technician who now worked in security systems, he understood how to gather evidence without drawing suspicion. Under the guise of upgrading our home's safety, Marcus installed discreet cameras and backed up everything to a hidden server. Every late-night phone call, every secret visitor, every time Andrew rifled through our safe, it was all preserved. The second ally is Valentina Lopez, a forensic accountant I had met years earlier through a charity project. Valentina specialized in uncovering financial abuse, and she didn't hesitate when I called. She began tracking Andrew's movements through our accounts, noticing patterns of small transfers to shadow companies and international banks. The deeper she dug, the clearer it became. Andrew wasn't just hiding money from me, he was building an escape plan. Finally, there was Rebecca Mills, an attorney with a reputation for dismantling men who weaponized money against their spouses. Rebecca knew the legal system was slow to act without hard evidence, so she instructed me to keep documenting, to never confront Andrew directly, and to prepare for an emergency filing the moment we had enough proof. Together, the three of them formed a lifeline. Marcus gave me protection, Valentina uncovered the financial web, and Rebecca plotted the legal strike. For 8 months we worked in secret, building a case brick by brick. On the surface I played the dutiful wife, smiling at Andrew's colleagues and laughing at his jokes. But beneath that facade, I was gathering the tools to dismantle his empire. He thought he held all the power. What he didn't know was that his control had already begun to slip through his fingers. Our anniversary dinner should have been a celebration. The waiter at Morton's Steakhouse had just set down dessert when Andrew raised his glass in a toast. To 12 years, he said smoothly, though his eyes never quite met mine. I forced a smile, tasting bitterness behind the sweetness of the chocolate cake. Hours later, his real gift would reveal itself. Instead of driving home, Andrew steered his Mercedes toward the interstate. The lights of the city faded in the rearview mirror as silence filled the car. My questions, "Where are we going? Why this way?" were met with clipped replies. When he finally pulled into a deserted rest stop, the place was nothing more than cracked pavement and boarded windows. He tapped the steering wheel, savoring the moment, then ordered me out. 37 miles from home, no taxis, no buses. His voice dripped with satisfaction. Walking might teach you respect. I opened the door slowly, heart steady, phone recording every word. As the car pulled away, I didn't chase after him or plead. Instead, I counted to 60, watching his taillights disappear into the dark. The air smelled of rain, heavy and electric. He believed he'd left me broken, stranded and afraid. But a black Ford truck idled behind the old gas station, its headlights off. Marcus stepped out, umbrella in hand, a thermos of coffee tucked under his arm. "Did you get everything?" he asked. I nodded, holding up the phone. Every word. Lightning split the sky as the first drops fell. Andrew thought he had orchestrated my humiliation. In reality, he had just handed me the final piece of evidence I needed. By the time Marcus and I reached the city, the storm had opened in full. Sheets of rain hammered the windshield as if the night itself wanted to erase what had just happened. But every detail mattered, and we had rehearsed this part carefully. I was not going home. I was going somewhere Andrew would never think to look. The hotel stood on a quiet corner near the river. Its warm lights and polished marble lobby felt like another world compared to the desolate rest stop. I walked in alone, my hair damp, my hands shaking just enough to look believable. At the desk, a young clerk looked up, startled by my appearance. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Her kindness was genuine, which made what came next even more powerful. "My husband left me at a rest stop," I whispered, letting my voice break. "I had to walk for miles before someone helped me." The clerk's face shifted from surprise to horror. She wrapped a towel around my shoulders and guided me to a chair, already drafting an incident report. Just as Rebecca had coached, the hotel now had a record, date, time, my condition, and my words. I checked in under my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, using an emergency credit card Andrew knew nothing about. Room 412 was small but safe. The curtains muffled the storm outside as I locked the door and set the chain in place. For the first time in years, I felt a sliver of control. Andrew thought I was stranded and powerless. In reality, I was already 2 steps ahead. While Andrew drove home imagining me broken, the real work was already in motion. Marcus set up his laptop on the small desk in my hotel room, transferring the audio file from my phone. The words played back with chilling clarity. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking might teach you some respect." His voice, so cold and certain, filled the room. It was the kind of evidence no judge could ignore. At the same time, Valentina was monitoring Andrew's financial activity from her office across town. Hours earlier, she had documented a transfer of $10,000 into an account in the Cayman Islands. It wasn't the first, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Her spreadsheets revealed a trail of hidden assets stretching back almost 2 years, small transfers at first, then larger ones, all routed through shell companies he controlled. He was siphoning money from both our accounts and his hedge fund clients. But money wasn't his only secret. Thanks to the cameras Marcus had installed under the guise of security upgrades, we had hours of footage. Just a week earlier, Andrew had brought Naomi Rodriguez, his assistant, into our home. The two of them laughed as they drank wine in my living room, Naomi draped in the silk robe Andrew had once given me on our honeymoon. In one recording, Andrew bragged, "The prenup says she gets nothing. By the time Amanda realizes, we'll be gone." I watched the footage with a strange calm. Heartbreak had passed months ago. What remained was a hard, cold resolve. Every file, every recording, every transfer was another stone in the wall we were building. Andrew believed he held all the power. What he didn't realize was that the storm he created was about to sweep everything he valued away. As the investigation deepened, one discovery cut deeper than all the others. It wasn't just Andrew hiding money, or betraying vows it was someone far closer who had helped him. My younger sister Jennifer had been struggling for years with gambling debts. I knew about her late-night calls asking for small loans, but I never realized how desperate she had become. Valentina traced several suspicious payments that led back to Jennifer's account. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then Marcus uncovered call logs, long conversations between her and Andrew, always timed when I was away. The realization landed like a blow. Andrew had exploited her weakness, offering to pay off her debts in exchange for information about our family. He wanted details about our parents' estate, our mother's health, and even old trust funds my father had established. Jennifer, trapped by shame and fear, had answered every question. To Andrew, she wasn't family, she was a tool. And to me, she was another painful reminder of how far his reach extended. When I confronted the truth, I didn't feel anger so much as sorrow. Betrayal doesn't always come with malice, sometimes it comes wrapped in desperation. Jennifer had been cornered, and Andrew had handed her away out at my expense. Still, I added her name to the growing file of evidence. Because in the end, whether by choice or by coercion, she had become part of his web, and webs can only be destroyed by pulling out every strand. The morning after Andrew abandoned me, Rebecca filed for an emergency hearing. By early afternoon, I walked into the courthouse wearing a navy suit I had purchased quietly weeks earlier. It wasn't just clothing, it was armor. Marcus carried a laptop loaded with recordings, while Valentina rolled in 2 boxes of financial documents. We were ready. Inside courtroom 4 billion, Andrew sat beside his freshly hired attorney, Richard Blackwood, a man known for shielding wealthy men from consequences. Andrew looked disheveled, his tie crooked, his confidence cracked. When his eyes met mine, rage flickered across his face. He had expected tears and pleas for forgiveness. Instead, he found me standing tall. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Caroline Coleman entered, her reputation for cutting through excuses preceding her. Rebecca wasted no time. "Your Honor, last night Andrew Carter deliberately abandoned his wife 37 miles from home during a severe storm. We have the audio recording." She pressed play, and Andrew's voice echoed through the courtroom. "You need a lesson. Walking might teach you some respect." The judge's gaze hardened. "Mr. Carter, did you say these words?" Andrew shifted uncomfortably. It was a misunderstanding," he stammered, "but the damage was done." Rebecca presented bank statements next, tracing millions funneled into offshore accounts. Valentina displayed charts of hidden transfers. The pile of evidence grew higher with every passing minute. Just as Andrew's lawyer tried to object, the courtroom doors opened. Agents from the SEC and FBI entered with a warrant. The timing was deliberate. Andrew's empire was collapsing in real time. And then, as if fate wanted one final twist, Naomi Rodriguez stormed in. Her voice shook as she shouted across the room, "You said she was crazy. You said the divorce was already final." She held up her phone, waving screenshots of his messages. Andrew buried his face in his hands. His lesson had turned into his undoing. The emergency hearing was only the beginning. Within weeks, Andrew was indicted on multiple charges: wire fraud, financial abuse, and embezzlement. The trial drew reporters from across the state. Each morning, the courthouse steps swarmed with cameras eager to capture the downfall of a man once hailed as a financial genius. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. Witness after witness took the stand. Elderly clients testified about how Andrew had convinced them to sign papers they barely understood. One woman described how he told her she was misremembering withdrawals, planting doubts about her memory, until she questioned her own sanity. Former employees explained how he ordered them to falsify records, punishing anyone who asked questions. Valentina walked the jury through charts of offshore accounts, exposing a pattern of deception stretching back years. The most dramatic testimony came from Naomi. No longer polished and glamorous, she sat on the stand with her hair pulled back and her voice steady. She admitted to her relationship with Andrew but revealed recordings of their private conversations. "He called it playing chess while everyone else played checkers," she said. On her phone, Andrew's voice boasted about draining accounts and leaving me with nothing. The jury listened in silence, their faces hardening with every word. And then came the shock no one expected. A young man named Christopher Walsh testified, introducing himself as Andrew's son from a relationship he had hidden for 2 decades. His mother had received monthly payments from Andrew funds traced directly to stolen client accounts. The revelation painted Andrew not only as a fraud but as a man willing to use stolen money to conceal his past. In the end, Andrew insisted on taking the stand himself. He tried to spin a story where he was misunderstood, even claiming I might have forged documents. But under cross-examination, his lies unraveled. By the time the prosecutor finished, the jury no longer saw a financial genius. They saw a man trapped in his own web of deceit. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear, guilty on all counts. Each word echoed through the courtroom like a hammer striking steel: wire fraud, embezzlement, financial abuse, conspiracy. Andrew Carter's empire had crumbled. 2 weeks later, we gathered again for sentencing. Judge Coleman's voice carried the weight of finality as she addressed him. "Mr. Carter, you exploited trust, targeted the vulnerable, and showed no remorse. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison, without the possibility of early release, 8 years behind bars." The man who once prided himself on control was now shackled, led away by marshals. Before he left, Andrew turned to me, his eyes filled with fury. He mouthed the words, "This isn't over." I stood, my voice calm but firm. "You're right. The civil suits start next month." The courtroom fell silent. For the first time in years, I was no longer the one silenced. Outside, reporters swarmed with questions, microphones flashing under the afternoon sun. Rebecca shielded me from the noise, but I could still feel the shift. I was no longer the woman abandoned at a rest stop. I was the woman who had turned betrayal into evidence, humiliation into strength, and control into justice. Andrew's lesson had ended. Mine was just beginning. With Andrew behind bars, I faced a choice. I could close the chapter and quietly rebuild my life, or I could take the pain he caused and transform it into something larger. The decision came quickly. With the whistleblower reward and assets secured through the court, I founded the Phoenix Foundation, a place for women trapped in financial or emotional abuse to find safety and guidance. Marcus oversaw security, installing panic buttons and surveillance designed to protect, not to control. Valentina organized financial forensics, teaching clients how to spot hidden accounts and unauthorized transfers. Rebecca offered legal clinics, showing women how to navigate divorce and custody battles with confidence. What had started as my survival plan became a lifeline for others. Our first client was Maria, a teacher whose husband had hidden their savings and threatened to deport her, even though she was a citizen. Within weeks, Valentina traced the money, Rebecca filed the papers, and Marcus arranged her safe transition. I sat with Maria as she cried, recognizing my own tears in hers. When she left with her children, walking into a new apartment with keys in her hand, I understood why the foundation mattered. Andrew had tried to erase me, but instead he had given me purpose. The Phoenix Foundation wasn't just my revenge, it was my rebirth, and a refuge for anyone who needed to rise from the ashes of control. Months after the trial, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakable Andrew's, written neatly on prison stationery. 4 pages of bitterness, blaming me for his downfall, claiming I had set him up from the start. He ended with a single line, "I hope you learned your lesson." I read it once, then quietly slipped it into a frame. The letter now hangs on the wall of my office at the Phoenix Foundation, right beside photos of women who have rebuilt their lives. When new clients ask about it, I tell them the truth. Yes, I did learn a lesson. I learned that cruelty exposes itself if you have the patience to collect the evidence. I learned that no one deserves to be silenced or abandoned. Most importantly, I learned that strength is not loud or violent, it is steady, strategic, and unstoppable. His words, meant to haunt me, became my daily reminder of victory. Looking back, I see that night at the rest stop not as an ending but as a turning point. Andrew thought he was teaching me about obedience, about knowing my place. Instead, he revealed exactly who he was, and gave me the proof I needed to reclaim my freedom. What began as humiliation became the foundation for justice, not only for me, but for others who had been silenced by control. The truth is, abuse is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in bank statements, in missing money, in the way someone dismisses your voice at the dinner table. But every pattern can be documented, and every secret can be uncovered. No one deserves to feel powerless. No one deserves to be left in the storm. If you have ever doubted your strength, remember my story. Preparation, patience, and the right support can turn despair into resolve. And when you rise, you don't just rise for yourself, you rise for others who are still searching for their way out. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your words might be the encouragement someone else is waiting for. Together we can turn lessons of cruelty into legacies of strength.